Streets Unplugged by the Luxembourg Street Photo Collective.
Hello and welcome to the Streets Unplugged podcast hosted by the Luxembourg Street Photo Collective. We are recording here in this beautiful place, this site of Les Rotondes, in the middle of the festival, of the 9th edition of our Light Leaks Festival. It's beautiful weather, a little bit cold, but we can make it. And today we have the pleasure to speak with a photographer, Greg Girard, whose work has profoundly shaped the way we see the modern city, especially in Asia. Hello, Greg.
Good morning.
It's nice to have you with us.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
The good vibes from Canada, but also from the other parts in the world. We love that. Greg, you are a Canadian photographer, and you're known for your atmospheric, deeply immersive images of urban environments, often captured at night, but not only, of course, and during moments of transition. Over the past 4 decades, you have lived and worked in cities such as Tokyo, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Vancouver, of course. And you have produced iconic bodies of work and acclaimed books like City of Darkness, Phantom Shanghai, and HKPM, Hong Kong 74 and 89. And your photographs don't just document, they evoke a sense of time, place, and memory that stays with you long after you have seen them. In today's conversation, we'll talk about your creative process, your long relationship with these cities and with Asia also, of course, and the role of memory and change in your images, how you see the evolving urban landscape today. So thank you very much for joining us, Greg. First question, it's the first time you're in Luxembourg?
It is, yeah, my first time here.
What are your impressions about it? Because you have this specific look on the urban landscape. So what are your impressions about our city?
You know, I don't know Europe. I'm not so familiar with European cities, so it's all new to me. I don't really have much to compare it to. But I guess the first thing that sort of struck me was it's quite international and connected to other places in a way I didn't realize. And, I connected with a flight to here through Paris. And, arriving at Luxembourg Airport, you see the Cargo Lux terminal, and that's a site I've seen on airplanes around the Asian region, so that kind of is something like, oh, I recognize that, So that's sort of one thing. But the city itself, maybe similar to other European cities, it feels very walkable. For me, quite lively. And unfortunately, I'm only here for a couple of days, so I don't have much time to explore it. But it's been great just to walk around.
It's a small city in comparison with the big mega cities that you're used to, no?
Yeah, compared to the monster-sized Asian cities. Yeah.
Good. You've spent many years photographing these big cities like Hong Kong, Shanghai, Tokyo also. What initially drew you to this urban landscape specifically in Asia?
I mean, I think as a young photographer, as a young person, I just wanted to get away from home and see other places. And after high school, friends and classmates were maybe working at part-time jobs or summer jobs, saving money to go to Europe, and that was the kind of the path back then. For some reason, that didn't appeal to me as much as the idea of going to Asia, Hong Kong, and in my case, the first place I went. It just felt further away, and that's what I wanted to do.
As far away as possible.
Kind of like that. Yeah.
Did you have any cultural ties? Did you have maybe movies or literature or anything that would attract you, or not specifically?
Not really. I mean, the early 70s, there weren't really Hong Kong movies that traveled, except perhaps for Bruce Lee, there was a book of photographs, travel photography, published by Time Life, and it had a photograph of Hong Kong in it, and that picture made me want to see that city.
Let's talk a little bit about your book, City of Darkness. It's become a sorry, we are recording this with live features, also organic features of us as human beings. Sorry. So your book, City of Darkness, it's become a key reference for the Kowloon walled city, which was a very strange place and which has been erased, I think, in the meantime. Can you tell us how you discovered that place and what compelled you to work on it so intensely?
Sure. I mean, just a little background. I mean, in the 80s when I was living in Hong Kong, no one really knew anything about the Kowloon walled city except its reputation as some place that parents told their kids not to go. Drugs, prostitution, gambling, danger, gangs. So it was a place that was known by its reputation, but not by any reality. And I was photographing near the airport one evening and came around a corner and just saw this thing that didn't fit into the rest of the landscape, this kind of agglomeration of buildings, 13, 14 floors high, all kind of crammed together. And I just figured that had to be the Kowloon walled city. And so little by little, I started trying to photograph there. And the main takeaway in the beginning for me was like, this place is nothing like how it's been described or what its myths were as far as the danger and the threat goes. I mean, it was just this incredible urban environment, very densely packed together, alleys, lanes rather than streets with piping and wires overhead, water dripping. So a very kind of dense noir kind of atmosphere for sure, but as far as any sort of danger, that was absent. And what you realize very quickly was this is just like a vertical kind of village where people are just trying to get by like anywhere else, but in a very profoundly compromised physical situation. But people are trying to educate their kids and take care of work and life. And so that's the side of things I ended up trying to show, because any other pictures that had been published before that kind of tapped into this fantasy, this myth of what the walled city was, and people were basically ignoring what it was really like and tried to make it look as bad as possible. And so I set about trying to kind of set the record straight, and then ran into another photographer, my colleague, Ian Lambert, in what became our book project, City of Darkness. And he was trained as an architect, and so he approached it as architectural phenomena, and my kind of interest in people and how they lived combined nicely and complemented each other's work. So we ended up basically spending about 4 years photographing there and ended up making a book.
Did you testify the end of the Kowloon district? Well, because it was completely destroyed, no?
That's right.
Erased.
That's right. Part of the agreement between Britain and China about the return to Hong Kong in 1997 dealt with what to do about the Kowloon walled city, because it essentially was a piece of sovereign Chinese territory in the middle of British colonial Hong Kong, and as such, it was not really
didn't fit.
It didn't fit into anybody's sort of administrative playbook, and that's why it ended up being what it was, this kind of in-between place where the laws of Hong Kong didn't really apply.
Mm-hmm.
Criminal activity, like violent crime, murder was prosecuted like anywhere else, but things like doctors and dentists and food factories, those all didn't have any kind of legal oversight by the authorities. So it was a very otherworldly kind of place.
Okay. So are there still people nostalgic of this city?
I think that's probably the right word. It's a nostalgia for something that no one experienced. It's an idea rather than a lived reality. So I think what it represents in Hong Kong was the Hong Kong that used to be, that toughness, that kind of
freedom.
The freedom from sort of oversight and the kind of life you make for yourself rather than receive.
Like the mythology of the Far West.
Kind of like that, very much so.
In general, your images portray a nocturnal cityscape, bathed in neon light. Many of your pictures, almost cinematic in feel. Is that an aesthetic you pursue, or something that emerged naturally over time?
I photographed at night right from the beginning. I liked the way things looked at night, and from an early age started exploring what different kind of films, how they look under artificial light. And back in those days, you had a much wider choice of films, and so I
in the analog world, previous world. Well,
yeah.
Yeah, because when you started, there was no digital photography.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that didn't come till, for me, decades later. So you did your work in film, not by any film aesthetic. It's just that's all there was. But you did learn what the different material did, and that was part of the craft. And it sounds a little outrageous to say it, but I kind of feel like I had night to myself in the sense that you didn't see night photographs except of a certain kind of night photograph that made night look either glamorous or perhaps a bit threatening. But I from an early age really just started looking at night in a kind of matter-of-fact way without light sources in the picture, and just how different films reacted to ambient light from wherever, whether it's the moon or neon or street lights or everything combined.
But what is it that the night reveals about a city that you don't see during daytime? What is the character of a city portrayed by night shots?
Well, I think for me it seems like something private and intimate in the sense that you're looking at these places that maybe function in the daytime and are meant for daytime. And when you photograph at night, I use a tripod, so everything slows down, and you maybe make your choices more carefully. You're looking at a scene rather than what's happening. So it's sort of looking at the nature of a place. You could call it that. I think night, these long exposures, it kind of elevates the ordinary. It throws a sort of a spotlight, as it were, not necessarily to make it grand or glamorous, but just somehow revealing.
Okay. About the moments of transition that you've captured in these different cities, rapid urban development, disappearing worlds. So what about the idea of memory and loss? How do they play? Which role do they play in your work? The memory of a city, the loss of things?
Yeah, that's never really been a conscious part of how I approach things. Especially as a younger photographer, the idea that you would be making things for posterity, for some future audience, never appealed to me, or never.
When you're young, you feel eternal.
That's right. Exactly. Absolutely. And, I was making pictures about now, for now. I wanted them to be seen, but there's no way to do that pre-internet unless you get published. And that wasn't an option. So you just make pictures, and they hardly get seen.
You didn't have the feeling that these places were doomed, not really, or
no. It was much more of a kind of a personal, subjective journey. I wanted to see things. I wanted to make pictures, and I let my sort of camera and whatever sensibility of the moment kind of guide me. So and I moved around a lot and somehow kept the pictures with me. And it really wasn't until the internet arrived, and for me in late 90s, early 2000s, that it's possible to start sharing things. And again, it's pre-social media. It's just the very, very beginnings of the internet, and things get seen in a way they couldn't.
Mm-hmm. What about the human beings in your photos? You've got, we're talking about these beautiful shots at night of the cityscapes. Lots of pictures that you made also during daytime. You play with the atmospheres, and the human being appears as an element inside this structure. You don't really portray directly people, but you put them inside the frame as an element and crucial part of the composition. Is it a deliberate choice?
In a way it is. I mean, in the beginning I started out photographing people and I started photographing at night. So I kind of did those two things in a way, in a kind of a parallel approach. And maybe little by little they start to overlap or go together. But I think, photographing a person is such a different interaction than having a tripod by yourself in the middle of the night somewhere. Yeah. So there's a social side to it. There's a kind of, making people say yes to your request if it's a stranger, and how to do that. I think every photographer learns that process in their own way, how to approach a stranger, and for me, it's always been easier to make a good picture of a stranger than someone I know. I think people are, photographers, each one is different about how they approach that and how, good or not they are at making a photograph of a person. But for me, I sort of feel it's always been more successful to photograph people I don't know. Mm-hmm. I'd like to fix that somehow, but so far it still seems to be the case.
Okay. What about the relationship, the immersive relationship with the city? How do you work on location? Are you more of a wanderer? I mean, whatever attracts your attention, you stick to it, or do you follow a more methodical, cartographic approach?
I think at the beginning, you wander around or you see things and you may not have something grand or ambitious planned, but maybe little by little you find you're attracted or interested to something, and then you realize that it's something. For example, in Shanghai, I moved there from Hong Kong in the late 90s and found a city that was maybe like Havana or East Berlin, a little bit cut off or very cut off from the capitalistic grid. So there's this sense of time frozen, and the urban development is much slower paced and not for profit. So the city looks a certain way. And in the case of Shanghai, it was maybe held back, post 49 after Mao's victory as a kind of a too westernized place. And by the mid-90s, the Chinese leader at the time, Deng Xiaoping, directed the place to catch up because places in the south were developing a lot faster, and Shanghai was kind of held back in a way. And so when I moved there from Hong Kong, this was in full force happening, this kind of remaking of the city. And so you had a city that was kind of preserved by neglect in a way, this early 20th century city that was being pulverized to make way for skyscrapers and new towers, apartments, office buildings. And so this was happening without any thought really to preserving any of the architectural heritage.
It's very, very brutal.
Very brutal. And unless that architectural connection was related to the Communist Party, a meeting, a person lived there, it played some role. Those were the places that were...
No second thought about erasing whatever.
Very, very minimal thought given to any of that. And so, you saw this thing that for, maybe a Westerner, you feel that this very westernized city with its mix of architectural types and styles should be protected, but none of that was happening. So, you do feel a certain... it's now or never kind of feeling. If you're going to photograph it, you better start like
goes
right
very
away.
Quickly.
Yeah.
Okay. So a little bit about the fact that you started, of course, during when analog was the norm, and then, of course, digital technique occurred. How did this shape your photographic approach? I mean, the transition from analog to digital, did it change your methods? Technically, was it easier to photograph the night? So
I'm still kind of struggling with that, to be perfectly honest. I still use both. I still shoot on film. Film is not only expensive, but hard to find, the kind I like using. transparency film, positive film, and so to some extent I'm kind of switching reluctantly because I have to. Right now I sort of maybe make one kind of picture on film and another kind on digital. Digital is of course great for low light. You can see into the darkness in a way that you couldn't even dream about when shooting film. So that's a new thing for me that I continue to kind of try to master, and it's changing so fast. You get used to one camera and suddenly it's 10 years old and there's other things that do it better. I'm kind of using both at the moment, and it's acceptable right now.
But for your project, you mix both?
I do. For a recent project in Japan, I've shot. It's probably, I guess it's my first book that'll have both in it kind of equally.
But you don't note it. You don't etiquette. This is analog. This is digital. You just let the flow go.
That's right. I don't announce it, but I think for anybody who pays attention to these things, you'll see it.
You'll
and notice.
feel it.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. No black and white, huh? You
in the beginning I did, but I haven't shot black and white for a long time.
Okay. Yeah. About your books, precisely. Of course, some of the books we mentioned before have become reference books, reference points. How do you see the relationship between photography and the book format? Do you always think in terms of series or publications?
Yeah, I suppose I do. I mean, like a lot of people from my generation, books were the way into photography. That's what there was to look at people whose work was serious enough to be book worthy, and it was a very kind of limited inventory of titles, back in the 70s. You probably could name them all quite easily, and now proliferation of books and ways to look at pictures and photography. But the book format feels right to me for a project that you want to work on in let's call it a long form way. I like to be working on, let's call it a book project or a big project, but also to be working on something that you don't quite know what it is. To be able to just wander and just make pictures.
So without having already in mind,
exactly.
Will it be an exhibition? Will it be a book?
Exactly. I think that can be quite a constraint if you're over concerned about those things. And
because it's conditioning your way of photographing. If you know it will be for a book.
That's right. Yeah, and I think I find it very satisfying to be able to work on a longer term project and to kind of start thinking about it in a long term way. And after a while, you think, okay, I've got this now. I need that. I should add this to it. What about this? At the same time, I wouldn't want that to stop me from just enjoying walking around and seeing the world and noticing it in the way that you only do when you're making pictures.
About the fact that you have lived many years in these different cities, so the projects are tied with this time that you pass on place, on location. How does it change the way you photograph? The fact that you're on location for a long time, and compared to a more fleeting or someone that only stays 1 month or 2 months in a place, how does it affect your work?
Well, I'm I guess drawn to certain places, and I visit them and revisit them. It's certainly easier to make a long-term project when you're living in a place rather than visiting repeatedly. Just logistically and financially. But I have done projects where I lived in one place and visited another to do the work, and that brings another kind of thing into the work. This kind of focus that you've got to make the best of your time. Where when you're living in a place, if you don't photograph today, you can maybe do it tomorrow. But when you travel to make the work, you it becomes a bit of a mission, and
you're more efficient.
more efficient. Yeah, I think that's the
But
right
that's
word.
an awful word, efficiency.
Efficiency, yeah. But when you're dealing with limited resources, it's maybe a consideration.
Important. Today you're living in Canada.
That's right.
Okay. You also did this book, Vancouver. How important was it for you to have a project specifically about the place where you were born or where you lived long time also?
Yeah, well, I mean, I didn't think of those early pictures as a project really, or as a book or any outcome. I mean, I didn't even know what that was. Like, what is a story? How do you photograph a story? I knew none of that and didn't think in those terms. I just went out and made pictures of the place I'm living. And I think I saw it a certain way. I was attracted to how things look at night, and I don't call it disappearing, but there's this time lag feature in a place quite often, especially if it's not in any international spotlight. Vancouver was a small city back in the 70s and wasn't connected to the world in the way that everywhere is. So I grew up in the suburbs, and traveling downtown, going to some parts of the city was like going back in time because they hadn't changed. It was the 70s, but in some places it looked like the 50s or the 40s. Mm-hmm. And so I just photographed, without knowing what it's going to become. And it wasn't until many years later that it was collected into a book.
But now it's changed. Now Vancouver is not anymore the place in the 70s.
That's right.
But that's the place you live, no?
That's
Vancouver.
Right. Yeah.
You still, intend to do another project on Vancouver of today, or not really?
Possibly. I mean, I don't know if I would call it that, though. You know what I mean? Like, maybe it would be a new project that doesn't have a city name attached to it. Maybe it would be about something else, and it just happens to be in Vancouver.
Vancouver, yeah, good. About the Asia, so you go back still today quite often to Asia.
That's right, yeah.
So that's really the cities that interest you more. So is there another project on the way? Yeah,
I've just finished photographing in Japan over the last sort of 6 years, with 2 years suspended because of COVID.
Yeah.
So I've been working on a project that looks at a kind of small bar in Japan. It's called a snack, which is a category of drinking place that was created in the 60s, just before the Tokyo Olympics, as a way for the bars to stay open later and the clubs to stay open later, because the authorities were worried about what foreign visitors are going to think of salacious Japanese nightlife, and they wanted to kind of protect them from that. And so this category called snack was dreamed up, where it's just drinks plus something
small to eat.
Yeah, and in the beginning they were quite fashionable, and now they've become this rather unfashionable place usually for older guys to go for a drink and maybe sing karaoke.
Again, a fascinating place to photograph at night.
It is, yeah. No, it has that feature, that
night hawks.
Yeah, that kind of night side to it. In some places they open in the day, but not many, and so it is again, kind of a night thing, and it's a way to. It's been actually really great because it's taken me to a lot of Japanese small towns that I would never think to visit.
When you are in these places, how do you do? You've got people from Japanese people helping you. You learn the language. How do you do practically to get in connection with the places and the people?
Yeah, I work both with an assistant or fixer to kind of help me negotiate the social side of things, because in these smaller towns especially, or even in Tokyo or Osaka or bigger cities, when a foreigner appears in the door of these places, the conversation stops and everybody's like, oh God, what do we do with this guy, And the snack etiquette really is quite different than a bar. It's much more of a personal place where the owner, the mama-san or the master, has a much closer relationship with his clients, and so you don't just walk in and sit down. The etiquette is you kind of appear in the door and ask if it's okay to come in. And so I can do that in Japanese, and my Japanese is basic but adequate for this kind of thing. And in any case, I can put people at ease in that way at least. And so it's like, okay, at least he speaks enough Japanese, so yeah, come on in. And then it begins. You try to figure out how to make the pictures, and a big part of it is just getting around to that. It's easier if I'm working with a Japanese fixer. They can do the socializing and let the foreigner make all the mistakes.
And then they apologize.
They apologize.
He's a foreigner, you understand.
Exactly. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So sometimes you have to play the naive part.
Yeah, you do.
Like Marcus said in his presentation, you have
make
to
yourself
the
small.
naive.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, good. And this will be next book.
That's right. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, it's called
Very interesting.
It's called Snack Sakura. So sakura is like cherry blossom, and it's kind of the most boring name for a bar in Japan.
Okay. It's really seems interesting, fascinating. It's the usual editor you're working with.
Yeah, I'm working with Misha Komanek in Berlin.
Okay.
And printing in Denmark next week.
Okay. Oh, so you will let us know when it's available.
I sure will.
Because then we can share with our friends.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Greg, for
Thank you.
taking time, because you're taking the plane now in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Back while you're touring a little bit in Europe.
Yeah, that's right. And then on to Denmark.
Yeah.
Printing.
I hope you had a nice stay here with us and in this city of Luxembourg, and that you will remember us.
I hope to come back.
And come back, of course, with some new projects. Well, for those listening, I highly recommend to explore Greg's books and projects. They are not only visually stunning, but also deeply reflective documents of time, change, and memory. The easiest way is to go to your website,
GregGirardPictures.com.
Exactly. And then you got all the information about the books and the projects, and the way also to buy the books if someone wants. Thank you very much, Greg. It was really a nice moment here having this chat with you.
Likewise, thanks.
And we wish you all the best for the future.
Thank you.
We wait for your return.
Thank you.
Thank you all, everybody. Bye bye.